Comrades, what a year we've had since we last met in Bridlington Hall. I've got to say, I think like Sam Vickers also quoted, that it doesn't actually seem like a year. There must be only about 10 months to every calendar year now, as the government are probably cutting back the time when we can enjoy ourselves. It's clearly been a year of highs and lows for our union, for the food industry and for society in general. And the only promise we seem to be getting from our politicians is that there's more to come. I presume that means there's going to be lows as government really deal in highs. At least that's the way it is for working people. The highlight for me, comrades, came on the 19th of September in Dublin Airport last year. I'm not talking about the President giving me a great highlight when we were told that we were going through security, that we'd have to have a retinal scan. And he said, have I got to take my trousers off for that? I said, no, not. So, joking apart, comrades, I'm talking about the phone call that I received from Brian Carlton, who was the HR director from Premier Foods, offering for the first time in over a month a settlement to the Hovis dispute. And I've got to say, the pride that I took and the smile that I had on my face when he said, we will settle with Wigan if I, as the General Secretary, would sign a disclaimer that any other factory that wanted to fight against 0 hours, we would reject them and wouldn't support them. You can imagine the elation, comrades, knowing that I was in a position to tell them to get stuffed. We will support our members who take the brave stance taken by those workers at Hovis in Wigan. I don't want to dwell too much on the happenings in Wigan at this moment in time, because I'll be responding on behalf of the executive to the motions on 0 hours, which are going to come probably on Tuesday. And of course, you won't be surprised the Hovis dispute will figure quite prominently on that. The low points for the union and the food industry in general have to revolve around the incessant programme of closures hitting our members' workplaces. In particular, as the President stated in his address, those involving the Two Sisters group. You know, Ranjit Singh came with a reputation of being a hard-nosed businessman who, on the march upwards and onwards in his quest to build a £3 billion empire. His HR director assured national trade union officials right across the movement that despite the fact that he had gone bankrupt before, he was not an asset stripper, and that his reputation with supermarket chains was second to none. Crap. Absolute crap. He and his band of disciples have systematically bought the companies cheap. They've raped and pillaged terms and conditions where where they've been allowed to. They've destroyed the value of workers' pensions, and then they've reduced redundancy down to the bare minimum. It's criminal and it needs investigating, and I'm pleased to say he will be getting investigated by our parliamentary group. You could be forgiven for thinking this was an overstretched business, a business that was borrowing too much, too quickly, and unable to deal with the consequences. Or is it plain old asset stripping that was denied early when they took the businesses over? I was involved in the talks at Corby, and I was present when the council offered him a new factory where they could capitalise not only the building, but the council would capitalise the plant and machinery that was going to be in there. So all the excuses about it wasn't in-line production, all the things that was in different rooms, or the roof was leaking, all those things were evaporated. They were taken away from him, the carpet was pulled from under him by the trade union and also by the council. And he refused it. Instead, we had this timid mishmash of blaming the supermarkets for the margins that they were given, before actually coming clean that the business was not being taken away. It was actually being given away by the company. And if his reputation was so good with the supermarkets, why did the cake business suddenly disappear from Havana Cakes to a competitor in the north? Why would that happen if you've got a great reputation with a supermarket? If there's anything to be thankful for, it's that our members at Havana Cakes wouldn't allow the company to cut terms and conditions and drive down the price redundancy. That took bottle. That took real bottle. And you know, society in general isn't faring any better. The claims that things are improvement are just a tissue of lies. It's almost a rerun of 1997, when you couldn't go an hour without hearing that D-Ream song, Things Can Only Get Better, blaring out somewhere. It became New Labour's signature tune for the election, and for the first part of that Blair-led government, we actually did see a little progress. The introduction of the social charter, cuts to VAT on fuel, and the right to recognition for trade unions when a majority of workers wanted it, were just to name a few of the treasures that we got. If things are getting better under this bunch of shysters in government, now as it's claimed, then I would hate to know what bad times look like. If we took a straw poll within this hall, I doubt that we'd get more than a handful who could say that their lives are improving to any great extent. But we'll all know somebody who is dependent on handouts to feed the families. To the working class, the green shoots of recovery are no more than weeds on the stony paths of poverty. If I'm overreacting, Chair, then why did the independent Trussell Trust announce that they had handed out in excess of 900,000 food parcels as opposed to 360,000 last year? It isn't because they're more accessible, like some government ministers claim. It isn't because people are eating more. It isn't because, it's because people have been driven to the edge of despair, to the very, very edge of starvation, by a government that doesn't care what happens to the general public. They're only interested in the money people. You know, just while I'm talking about food banks, I'd like to sincerely thank one of our young delegates, April Walcott, one of our youth delegates from Manchester, for the work that she does in collecting food for one of the food banks in Sheffield, where she's a student at university, and in her spare time, she goes out and she collects food for this food bank. I think it's absolutely remarkable. You know, well done, April. It's fantastic. You know, if things were really, really improving in society, then why are so many thousands of people sleeping rough on the streets of our cities? It's not because it's a preferred option or they like the fresh air. It's precisely because they have no option other than to sleep rough. Lack of affordable housing, exorbitant rents being charged by Rackman-style landlords, and of course the dreaded bedroom tax, pressurising already impoverished people into the abyss of despair. You know, decisions in society, comrades, created by cretins like George Osborne, who uses cliches about the unemployed hiding behind the curtains while you're returning from your night shift. Divisive rhetoric aimed at creating fissures between those with very little and those who have even less. While we fight with our own class, they carry on plundering us. Remember, it's not the unemployed attacking your terms and conditions. It's not the unemployed driving a coach and horses through your working agreements. It's the greedy employers that you work for, backed by even greedier politicians. And their self-serving anti-worker legislation, that is what's doing you down, comrades. And where does this leave our political system? Well, clearly, as far as I'm concerned, not in a good place. I'm absolutely sick to death of hearing and seeing Nigel Farage's racist, xenophobic rants plaguing our media, in particular the BBC, which we own. The right-wing press almost hero-worshipping him, and his achievements in the recent elections. Talk about the press having the ability to amplify nothingness. That's exactly what they're doing. You know, did UKIP do well, or did the mainstream parties underachieve? I suppose Nigel Farage captured a little of the populace imagination, and there's no doubt that both Tories and Labour didn't do as well as could and should have been expected. The Lib Dems were just glad that the monster raving loony party didn't stand to push them even further down the pecking order. The real tragedy, comrades, of course, is the exceptionally low turnout. We're a turnout of 34% in a country that prides itself on supposedly being democratic. It's terrible, but not entirely unexpected, that people lose trust in the politicians and the politics of our country. You know, constant attacks from the coalition, linked with almost total inertia from the Labour Party, have driven the electorate to a choice between a UKIP protest vote or almost total apathy. Now, personally, I believe UKIP comes somewhere behind apathy in the usefulness stakes, and time will show that the lack of substance and value that they've ever offered to the British public. The President made a point this morning that, you know, judging by the amount of time that Nigel Farage spends in a pub with a beer in his hand, and then outside being one of the lads sucking on a fag, that it won't be long before it takes a toll on his body. The only part of him that will remain undamaged will be his pocket, because he's an ex-banker and he always gets somebody else to pay for the mistakes. What a dilemma he faces. If the guy looking into his lungs or his liver happens to be the Romanian surgeon living next door, or if the Nigerian nurse assists in is one of those who came over and took somebody else's job. What a dilemma he's going to face if it's going to help his health. I'm sure hypocrisy, though, will win through, comrades. He'll close his eyes and he'll dream his policy for cleansing our workplaces of immigrant workers has actually worked, and that these people aren't foreign at all. He, like his party, and I know it's been done down the press, he, like his party, are closet racists, except the doors of the closet are open for all to see. He's a chancer, ready to prey on people's fears in much the same way as the BNP did a number of years ago. And where did the BNP vote go? Where did the English Defence League votes go? And indeed the extreme right votes from the Tory party? Yeah, you guessed it, they went to UKIP. Unlike the right-wing press, I'm not going to give any more time to UKIP, and instead I want to devote some time to my visions for Labour and our visions for Labour. Ed Miliband has a major job on his hands if he's to get the natural Labour voters back on side. And promising light-touch austerity is not the way he's going to do it. But let me give him a few pointers. Follow through on the pledge that he made to the TUC Congress when we were there last year to scrap zero-hour contracts. That, comrades, is a vote winner. Pledge to alleviate poverty by introducing a living wage. That's a vote winner. Scrap the dreaded bedroom tax. That's a vote winner. You know, with thousands of people needing affordable homes right across the country, build those thousands of homes that are needed. Include council houses. That is a vote winner. And I'm sure if Andy Burnham had been here tomorrow, he would have been talking about fully capitalising our NHS so that people can get treatment at the point of need and free of charge. That is a vote winner, comrades. We've had the get-rich scheme within our Royal Mail. Well, take our postal services back into public ownership with no inflated buyback to the Tories who bought them or ended up with them. And while we're at it, let's have our rail network and utilities back. They're all vote winners. Pledge to stop fracking. reopen and employ factories, give workers their access to justice back, and repeal the most heinous elements of the Tory employment legislation. All easy tasks, all relatively cheap, and all would strengthen our support for Labour. You get the gist? That's how it's working. A few simple things can make all the difference, and a Labour Party can rule forever if it makes those changes and represents the people they're meant to. You know, I haven't mentioned other things that I'm sure John MacDonald mentioned some of them today. I haven't mentioned the introduction of a mansion tax, a Robin Hood tax, a levy on bankers' bonuses, and a pledge to get those who avoid paying their taxes with the same vigour that they would go after you or I if we owed a few pounds. Vote winners. And vote winners that could fund the inward investment needed to capitalise the pledges I have just made out on behalf of Ed's behalf. Comrades, over the course of conference, we will have debated the hopes and visions for not only our members, but society in general. If we can see it, then we ask the question, why can't politicians see it? In particular, politicians from the Labour Party who we help to fund. Chair, I want to finish off with another little reminder to both the trade union and the labour movement on a subject that I know that you've been very, very close to. That is the links between our movement and our political party. And I say our political party because the trade union movement was not born out of the Labour Party. It's quite the opposite. The Labour Party was born out of the trade union movement. Do you know, when they were debating the Collins report in London, when they recalled conference, and Ian and Pauline McCarthy went along to it, I'm pleased to say, well, I'm not pleased to say, I'm actually disappointed, but only 3 unions who are affiliated to the Labour Party voted against the Collins report. Now, I know that weeks before, we had all the support. Unite, we're going to do it, we're going to fight the battles they were leading. We were one of the unions who supported the stuff at Grangemouth. I was one of the ones who went on the press, on the television, to tell the press to keep away from Len McCluskey, because if he worked as hard as he did for his members, then it'd be a much better world. But then when it come down to the pressure from the Labour Party, they backed off. All the big unions backed off. The company we got, the union that we got sort of paired with this morning, Community, they backed off. 3 unions, comrades, refused to support the Collins review. BEC2, which is a very small television union, the Musicians Union, who sit in the GFTU executive with us, and of course our own union. And comrades, that is something we can be proud of. We fought for working people. And as Madeleine McCarthy points out quite often, and you'll see it in the motions, the mighty Bakers Union prevailed again. That's why we should be a haven for people who want a socialist future, people who want to take the left-wing fight forward, those who do want to see a political party that represents the true values of people. The haven is going to be the Bakers Union. It's not going to be, as much good work as big unions do, it is not going to be the haven of our political future, because when the chips are down, they withdraw from it. It is a scandal, comrades, that others could not carry through the courage of their convictions and vote with us. But sometimes the value of sound bites on television and on radio and in the newspapers is much better than the lure of justice for working people. So let me finish by sending a message to the Labour Party leadership that other trade union leaders failed to send, and that Ian, our president, was actually refused the opportunity to state at that conference. And I repeat it, and I make no apology for repeating it. The Labour Party was born out of our movement to give working people a say in Parliament, not the other way round, and we will not tamely kowtow to the pressures that others have rolled over and accepted. We will fight to retain the link and fight to ensure our members and their families have direct access to the decision makers in Parliament. Comrades, we can and should be in a position to influence those who seek to change our lives. Let's relish that battle and show it in the motions that we pass at conference. Thank you, comrades.